Hello and welcome. My name is Bill Reeks and I am the CEO and Chief Analyst of the Gramercy Institute. And it is a pleasure to have all of you with us today. Today is a very special day because this is the first of four different panel discussions that we are hosting in a series that we call Financial Agency Brilliance. The title of the series speaks for itself because this is all featuring agencies with a specialization in financial who I won't say happen to be brilliant, but who I have strategically brought together because they are brilliant. And that said, it is a pleasure to feature them and to talk with them about various issues that are of interest to financial services marketers today. And we break it down according to different areas. For example, today we're talking about media. 1 week from today, on September 15th, we're talking about mapping the customer journey. On September 22nd, on strategy making in financial services marketing. And on September 29th, we're talking about the creative process in financial services marketing. Again, all through the agency lens. I want to give a big shout out to those logos that are above my shoulder right now. I want to thank Dianomi, Investing Channel, and Additions Financial for their support and for bringing us all together here today. Hats off to all of you because we can't do this without you. So thank you. That all said, let's get to the heart of what we are all here to do. And that's to listen to some of the opinions and the thoughts of some of today's leading financial agency figures, all through the media lens, if we will. That being said, let's begin with an introduction from everyone. Could I ask Andrew Wagner, would you please chime in, meet the group, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background? You might be on mute, Andy. Andrew?
Oh.
There we go. All right, there we go. You never sounded better. No, go right ahead.
Well, thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with the team and to the audience. My name is Andrew Wagner, and I'm the founder CEO of Blacklight Media and Analytics. For the last 22 years, we've been helping clients drive customer acquisition and retention through the digital channel, and really a focus on direct consumer and direct response. We have B2B clients that we help with ABM, and we help companies drive brand as well with engagement metrics and social. But we're really about identifying a success event, a success metric explicitly, and defining a measurement stick to achieve that, and defining the baselines and growing the business. We have four practices in our organization: paid search, paid social, display, affiliate, and analytics. Our clients are in the deposit side, the lending side, and the credit card side. So really hardcore direct-to-consumer, direct response organization in all of the elements that make up financial services acquisition business. And over the last 22 years, our client base, currently Capital One, PenFed, Deserve, Drenaya, in the past, Ditech, Simple Bank, Providian Bank, ING Direct. In the end of the day, 22 years of living with the client's profit and loss statements, understanding what business line target metrics are in terms of achieving explicit targets, both on customers and customer value, and building models using digital media to accomplish those objectives and to be able to scale those businesses.
Andy, thank you for that. A quick question: has financial always been a big focus of the types of clients that you seem to bring in under your roof?
Yes, and that has a lot to do with, I think, the people that we've become partners with over the years. So 22 years ago, working with a Providian Bank, and then from there you meet marketers and marketing leadership, as well as marketing day to day, and they move around through the organization, and we continue to acquire clients because we become important tools in the tool belt of the clients that we're executing for. So Although our disciplines are horizontal in terms of the businesses that we can provide value to, and we provide a continuum and a sort of philosophy and approach to, we find ourselves living in the financial services space even more than anything because of relationships and referrals from even publishing partners that we've done good work with.
Yeah. Andrew, or Andy, I should say, thank you very much for that intro. I'll move over to Andrew. Andrew Chesney, if you would kindly tell us a little bit more about yourself, about Fundamental Media, and anything else you care to share, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks, Bill, for the opportunity and pleased to take part today. I'm president of Fundamental Media North America. Been in the media industry for 20 odd years, both on the media owner side and latterly 7 or 8 or 9 years, I forget now, on the agency side. We are a planning, buying consultancy agency. We have a separate technology division, so we produce proprietary analytics tools for our clients, and we're moving a lot more into that financial technology space, as that's where we see the market moving. Fundamental's been around 20 odd years now. Offices London, Boston, Sydney, Hong Kong. So we've been expanding our footprint, expanding our client roster. Lots going on in financial media, especially in that data and analytics side. So very exciting place to be at this moment in time.
You know, you seem to be in financial markets, or is it just my imagination? Have you strategically placed your offices around the world in major financial hubs, or is it just sort of the way it's worked?
Well, a bit of both. It's the way it's worked, and it's where we've acquired clients. We try to stick as close as we can to them. As Anne and I and yourself were discussing before, the world has changed. So we've gone from weekly meetings in face with our clients to virtual meetings. So we could
we're in Sydney.
We could probably be pretty much wherever we wanted to be, as long as we've got the right backdrop. But yeah, to your point, we've generally set up in financial hubs as that where we see our critical mass for our investment management clients.
Sure. Well, terrific to have you on board, and thank you so much for joining us. And I'll toss this over to you, Anne. Would you please tell us a little bit more about T1 Media and your own expertise and anything else you would care to include?
So I am a partner at T1 Media, and we are a strategic media buying and planning consultancy as well. I think our key point of difference is that we focus on building long-term relationships with clients that is based on a mutual commitment to performance. So whatever the client's objectives and goals are. We've worked with many clients in the financial services space for upwards of over a decade. Our agency was founded 20 years ago. And as I just mentioned, interestingly, 20 years ago, it was founded as a virtual shop. So we are a group of folks that had all worked together at different big agencies across the space of time and have regrouped ourselves, and were founded again 20 years ago. So we sit in offices all over the country, and we're well suited and prepared for the homebound economy.
And thank you very much for that. And I do have a follow-up question, if I may. And when we were in our pre-call, I found it extraordinary that you did, by choice, set yourselves up as a virtual agency, where many agencies have been forced to and have made good of it. But you guys, 20 years ago, chose to do it. And what was your thinking about the strategic value of doing that back then?
So it was founded by Terry McGrath 20 years ago. So I joined Terry in our most recent iteration of partnership 6 years ago. I had worked with her prior to that at a few different shops. I think the value in what we serve is in, senior level partners working direct with our clients. And we recognized that those partners could sit anywhere and work with clients. It didn't come down to being physically together. As I also noted, we have all worked together, so we have common practices in place. and have, already an established process. So a lot of what is transferred in person when you're working in an agency existed long before our agency was founded. So it just worked out naturally. And I think if you think through, the transformation of technology over the past 20 years, certainly T1 was probably a pioneer in virtual, but the technology existed for this to happen. And it's just evolved over time, and it's grown over time, and it's, certainly benefited from things like Zoom and different enhancements that came through in the past, 18 months, 2 years.
Sure. And again, thank you. Delighted to have you with us. I'll move on to you, Kimberly, if you would. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background, but also about Ptarmigan.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you.
Ptarmigan begins with a P.
Yes. So why Ptarmigan is named Ptarmigan is probably a longer story than I have in my 1-minute intro here. Happy to go into that at another point in time, though. But Ptarmigan Media is similar to Fundamental and T1 Media. We are a media planning, buying consultancy. We were founded over 25 years ago out of the UK as well, and we opened our North America presence just shy of 8 years ago. We work exclusively with the financial community, focusing on asset management, investment banking, insurance, and others. I think our roster goes well beyond this at this point. I joined Ptarmigan 6.5 years ago out of the New York office, and we've seen incremental growth year over year, which has been really fun to be a part of. I think we try to differentiate ourselves really in our knowledge and our people. And I think we've heard that across the board. I think it's probably why all of us are sitting here today. I'm not sure you can have really deep-rooted relationships with your clients that go long-term if you are not experts in the space beyond the media category, because there's lots of amazing media agencies out there that are deeply rooted in all things media. But to be able to play properly and service our clients properly in the financial space, we have to understand their business in and out. And you can't do that without a really deep investment in your people. And so that's been our big focus, not just in New York, but from a global perspective as well. And we've also put a huge emphasis in the last 3 to 5 years in our digital capabilities. We've grown our digital team both in North America, but also globally exponentially, and have really made it a focus to have experts in not just the site direct and the publisher partnerships, but also the programmatic, the search, the social, a lot of the demand gen capabilities, and then very importantly, the analytics. And we've made a lot of investment from a people and a knowledge perspective there. I think we do really focus on working with our clients so that they understand how those components play with the larger picture and a holistic strategy. And I think that that's really what set us apart as an agency and helped us grow our client base to be 34 clients out of the New York office today.
Kim, thank you for that. I happen to know that a good many of your clients, if not perhaps all of them, are financial in nature. Could you just share your thought or thinking about what makes a financial client unique to what you guys do? What are their needs, and why are they might they be unique such that your specialization is important to them?
Sure. I can speak because I came from a world outside of finance before I came to Ptarmigan. I had financial experience in some of the clients, but I'd also worked in telecom, technology, as well as CPG. And so I think really understanding that it's different and that you can't just use the same standard best practices that are used in very consumer-facing campaign strategies when it comes to financial strategy and campaigns is really important. And I'm going to harp on our people for a second, because I think we can't be as good as we are without our team that is very deeply rooted in this space as well. But when you pick up the phone and have a conversation with your clients about long-term strategy or building a campaign with different tactics. And I know that we're going to get into some of these in some of the questions in a few minutes. But the strategy that you're going to set up for a social campaign for a financial client is drastically different than you will for a telecom or a CPG or any of the consumer categories. And so I think we've really tried to be partners and strategic partners with our clients to, one, help make sure they understand that we know the difference, and then work with them to craft a strategy that's going to help them from a business perspective prove the value of media long term.
Yeah, Kim, thank you for that explanation. Let's start with our first question that's on my mind. I'll look to you, Andrew Chesney, if I may, for this one. What's changed big picture in media today? And when I say in a few minutes, I want to get into the granularity of our professions and the work of the planner and the strategist, et cetera. But I'm just interested in what has changed lately in terms of media and the way people, not necessarily financial, but perhaps people consume their media. What's different?
I think everything's different, and everything changes pretty frequently. But I think changes in platform, changes in delivery, changes in consumption, movement in types of device, more screen time consumed. There's generational differences. So we see like huge change across everything in media, everything from the platforms through to the analytics. I think, the thing that to be cognizant of is, for sure, there are global trends, but there are also huge differences between, in the areas that we sit in investment management, there's massive changes in media consumption behavior that are different from an institutional investor to a financial advisor to a retail investor. And for us, the devil is really in the detail. It's understanding that as much as we'd love there to be, there isn't a one size fits all solution to this.
I get it. It's hard to say, well, everything's changing in this way. But I am interested to know, are you finding that digital engagement, for example, is up considerably in the last 2 years? Or are you finding people are getting burned out given what we've all been through? How might you express that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what we did see is when, going back to 2020, when we all became sort of homebound and there wasn't this face-to-face interaction, we were looking at volumes of traffic through financial websites, and they were up exponentially, 70, 80, 90, 100, 120% volume of traffic coming through to site. And as such, there was a huge shift by many brands into digital. So they may not have had a really complex built out digital strategy, but they knew that's where people were going. So they invested a lot of money into digital. And that meant, more impressions, crazy amounts of brands with display advertising. So what we have seen is quite a foundational shift in the way that people have addressed digital. Engagement has improved for those that have a coherent digital strategy. We've also seen that, as people moved away from face-to-face and they moved away from events, investment managers' websites really became a focal point for them. And if anyone works in investment management, they'll know that maybe that's an area that there wasn't huge investment that had gone into previously. So people were seeing people's on-site experience was very, very different than the actual experience that they thought they were getting, because they're used to Amazon and eBay and AliExpress and everything else. They go to investment management website and it'll be really clunky. So where we've seen a real investment in digital has been in the content plays. It's been in spending time developing a strategy, and more importantly, it's been marrying the on-site experience with the perception that you're giving through the advertising. So there's been huge investment in UX, there's been huge investment in website design, there's been huge investment in analytics as well. And that's been a big change.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you very much for those responses. Andy Wagner, let's move to you. I'm going to ask you the same essential question. I guess, first of all, are you agreeing with what Andrew Chesney has just shared with us? And are there any additional thoughts that you might have to offer to that? Oh, you're on mute, my friend.
Sorry for that.
There you go.
Although there is a lot of change over the last several years as it relates to consumer usage, what we find with direct response executions and the media that exists for direct response executions, if we just talk about the last 3 years, the platforms that we're executing on to drive new customers continue to be names that we know from a personal finance perspective. So a lot of the publishers are still known quantities, but what has been changing is the use, from a privacy perspective, the use of data and how the use of third-party data is no longer available in certain platforms, and a significant increase in the need to manage your first-party data well and port your first-party data into publisher environments so that you can execute against customers or prospects that are in your database or retention executions. We're finding a lot of competition entering the space. Is in financial services and fintech. There's just a significant amount of new entrants and competition within the space. The addition of, just talking about crypto in the last 24 months, really, and how we have a client that powers a credit card where all of the rewards are provided in crypto. So instead of getting points, you're buying into crypto, and it's been an explosive product. But what's interesting is that with product and product innovation, some of the players out there, let's call it like a NerdWallet, for example, they don't necessarily have structures to support these new product sets. They may market credit cards by rewards cards or student cards or high or low interest cards or et cetera. But there's no, some of the publishers we're finding in this world don't actually have platforms for which they can market some of the unique product offerings and hybrid offerings that are coming into the marketplace. So things are changing, things are always changing, but in the last 3 years, if you looked at a list of the publishers, I think you would see very similar publishers over the last 3 years. But what's happened is that the tactics underneath of those publishers are changing.
Yeah. Andy, thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to mention right now that I think you have to leave in a few minutes, and when you need to, we will consider that you have already said goodbye. So I just wanted to give you that permission right here. But I do thank you for those thoughts and remarks. And I'll move over to you now, Anne. I'm going to ask you the same question about changes in media, but I also want to turn our focus also toward how these changes might affect the world of the I'll call it the media planner or the strategist in today's day and age.
So, right, I think as a media planner, you're grounded in the consumer and the client objectives and goals, right? But where the change has come forward is certainly a function of, the fragmentation in the ecosystem and lots more choice on the consumer or user end, like where they can find and the brands and the publishers that they can interact with. Another factor that's really driven lots of change, specifically more recently, is the technology partners, right? Big tech. Andy had mentioned the changes to privacy that are coming forth. There's lots of regulation. I think we all went through GDPR, but there's more forthcoming regulation, specifically out of California, that will drive change. So how we go to market, right, and how we buy and the tactics and strategies that we use are different, but it still is grounded in the same need for strategic media planning. And in many regards, where if your go-to-market strategies are based on, AI or, however you want to say, optimization strategies with very similar bid logic rules from a handful of partners, your strategic approach to your media plan is really a key point of differentiation. So I think the principles of media planning, you know, where you're forced to be part anthropologist and understand consumers and understand their needs, you know, to have your MBA hat and understand business objectives, and then to have, you know, a scientific approach, how you go to market and how you create plans that can be that can scale and repeat success, are still, you know, foundationally the same, right? The process and how we look at things and how we evaluate. And the difference from the media side is really having to be, you know, I wouldn't say a technologist, but understanding something about technology. And also it's incumbent upon us, you know, over the past, you know, decade, but more so over the past, you know, year and a half, is to be agile. So if you went to market with a plan in 2020 where you were utilizing print and out of home, which are very big tactics outside of digital, right, for this space, you know, you really had to pivot pretty quick. And it's a question still outstanding, like when these tactics will make sense, because, you know, we don't know when or how we all get out of our homes in a permanent way and move back into business settings and one-on-one interactions. So I think the, you know, the differentiation and the key is to have a strong approach and understand your consumer and be able to execute on client business goals. And that, again, isn't, you know, done on the AI bid rule side. That's done in the planning process.
Yeah. And thank you. I have a follow-up question for you. And have the metrics of success for your agency, meaning what you are being judged by or on,
right,
have they changed? And if they in recent times, and if so, how might you express what those changes are?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, clients are being far more mindful about the balance of working and non-working dollars, right? And it is incumbent upon the agency to showcase success, right? So, you know, I don't know that that is measurable, you know, from an ROI perspective on a short term. You know, if you're supporting brand awareness, right, that doesn't come through in a multi-touch attribution model. So, you know, you really do need to understand more than campaign KPIs. You need to understand business KPIs and be able to have that conversation beyond what the value of a click is. It's what the value of the agency thinking is and how that turns back into business value.
It's a really interesting point that you mentioned, because I am sure in this data-driven world that the easy, you know, backstop for us to sort of go by is like, okay, this metric, this metric, this metric, but without sort of weaving them together to say, you know, to your point about the overall thinking and the overall value that an agency has really delivered. And I don't need, well, I'm repeating your own point. I think that you know, that has to be factored in, and perhaps maybe not always it is in the right way.
And the other element, and I don't want to like side rail this, but it's just, what is the operational cost of your idea, right? So you bring a big idea to a client. Can they execute on it with the resources they have on hand? Or how do you find those resources? So the conversation isn't just about clicks. It's about how you bring something to market and how you can do that with the resources you have on hand, which really is more of that relationship and understanding of what your client is working on beyond just like an ad campaign.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And Kim, I'd like to move on to you, if I may, and if you would share with me, and based on some of the conversations we've already had in this panel, as well as any other thoughts you might yourself about media. But tell us how the work of the media strategist or the media planner has changed in recent months or years.
Sure. I mean, I think everything that Andrew, Andy, and Anne said, I definitely, we felt at Ptarmigan across the board. I think from our perspective, it's interesting. There was a stat that came out in a study from last summer that shared that the financial advisor and institutional investor community was still consuming the same standard places that they had always consumed. But instead of just going to 1 or 2 sources, they were now going to 4 to 6 sources. And so when we think about our planning from a holistic perspective, I think we've tried to keep that in mind. You know, how has our target audiences changed with time? How have they become more skeptical or scrutinize the sources that they are consuming? And frankly, they have more time to consume digital content than they've had in the past. And so I think all of that goes to, and I can't remember who mentioned this, you know, planning used to be more of a 1 or 2 or 3, maybe a quarterly process, right? I think for us, planning has become more of an iterative process. It's not a, here's your annual plan, let's move forward. A lot of our clients are moving away from setting an annual plan or booking annual commitments, which comes with a whole host of challenges in itself, specifically inventory avails or, you know, larger partnerships or packages. But I think, you know, one of the things that we've been having ongoing conversations with our clients about has been, how do we build campaigns and strategies that are built for the long term, that are really agile, that are not ones that we need to every year throw out the strategy and start over. And we've not been having these conversations just for the past 18 months, but we've started having these conversations 2.5 years ago to say, you know, it's really crucial that we think about not just what are your business goals and objectives today, but what are your bigger goals? What are your longer term roadmaps? And so I think for us, yes, change has happened quite a bit in this 18-month period where we've needed to pivot faster, as have our clients. We've needed to advise our clients in a much more real-time, kind of on the fly basis. But I think a lot of that was, we were helped with it because we had already thought about the bigger picture strategy. And that strategy isn't changing in the long term. We're just pivoting the tactics that kind of go to execute the strategy. And so for us, I think it's been training our team to be, you know, let's not think of the bigger, you know, it doesn't need to be this really beautiful, picturesque deck. Let's be able to have these really quick conversations and POVs and get them out to our clients, because our clients that have been able to pivot with our guidance and support have been the ones that have been able to monopolize on all of the volatility and change that has happened in the last 18 months. And I think in the financial space, that's not a small feat in itself. You know, I think if you look back at the spring of 2020 and brands in this space that were able to respond real time, despite necessarily being set up for it, are the ones that kind of came out on top of it. And so I think we've, you know, the role of a media planner is become more of a consultant and an advisor and a strategist across the board, versus I think historically it's been a little bit more tactical. I think the other big thing that has been a huge focus, and I know Andrew mentioned this and so did Anne, in terms of metrics and measurement are the #1 topic of conversation amongst our clients on a daily, ongoing basis. And I think making sure that we build measurement plans for the long term and understand what success looks like, and that we are properly managing expectations for partnerships and programs across the board has been really crucial. And it's not that it wasn't important before, but our clients are under more and more pressure than they've ever been before. And so it's our job to make sure that they have everything at their fingertips so that they're able to respond to their business and their leadership to be able to back the decisions that they've had to make in a very short time period.
You know, that's a really interesting point, particularly as it relates to one of your first points that you made about challenging your clients for their big longer term plans and planning. Because as we touched upon earlier in this panel, you know, you don't just want to live by this unitary set of metrics, right? That just speaks to, well, this is how this campaign performed, without really looking at a bigger picture and how it might affect longer term goals and bigger picture goals that your clients may have. So hats off to you guys for incorporating the, as I say, or challenging your clients to really offer up the longer term view before you embark on your work.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one of the things that we've worked, I will say that our team has done really well is, and again, I being kind of that arm of our clients and that extension of our clients, and being able to have really honest conversations and pushing the marketing teams that we work with to have larger conversations with their leadership, to say, you know, you know, some of our clients pulled back in 2020, others, you know, invested more, and definitely as we think about their strategies for 2021, we've seen changes and shifts in that. And so how do we get them as a marketing team to speak to the sales team and the wider business group to ensure that everybody's on the same page about what marketing and media is doing, because it's so intertwined with what everybody else is doing. And it's important that we're building measurement systems, as I said before, that everybody appreciates, understands, and is aligned with. Because if you're not, then that's where we've seen challenges with clients, you know, getting to the end of the campaign or getting to a checkpoint and not being able to fully explain what they've been doing. And so, you know, to circle back to your initial question, I think it's making sure that we are training our people and really pushing our clients to answer some of those difficult questions.
Yeah. Kim, thank you for this. Andrew, Chesney, I'd like to move our conversation along to you. Obviously, we are, you know, just climbing out of this socially distant environment that we've been forced to exist in. You know, for good or for bad, there have been changes that have taken place. My question to you is, what is the immediate future going to look like for us as this social distant way that we're become accustomed to dissolves, right? And I believe there's been some productive things, some good things that we've been forced to undertake and adapt to. But I believe there's some other things that maybe haven't. But what is our immediate post-pandemic world going to look like in terms of some of the changes that we've incorporated and some we may never go back to again? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's going to depend on the return to work, really. And there's, you know, there's different approaches. I have friends that work in banks who are not scheduled to return until September 2022. So that's a long tail there. But I think, you know, both Anne mentioned and Kim mentioned about being agile and the agility in plans and the ability to pivot and still deliver a return on investment. So I think, you know, there was a huge influx into digital, away from print and away from events. I don't think that's going to change short term, but I think that, you know, we are starting to see an appetite for clients to return to events. I think in the way that we've seen our relationship differ with clients, I think there's been a lot of, you know, a conversation, very great points from Anne and Kim as well. But I think one of the things where we've been sucked into a lot more with clients that we weren't necessarily historically involved in is sales enablement, because the sales teams, you know, internal or external wholesalers, haven't been having this face-to-face time with the financial advisors, and they're struggling. They're struggling to get meetings. They're struggling to get time on people's calendars. And we've been working with brands to look how we can facilitate sales enablement. I would envisage that's going to continue. I don't see many of the wires in the short term welcoming wholesalers back into their offices, especially with everything that's going on with the Delta variant at this moment in time. So I envisage there'll be more time spent and more investment there. In terms of media plans, it's still going to be heavily focused on digital. I think one of the things that we have seen, and again, Anne made a very, very valid point, and Kim as well, around educating clients around what metrics actually mean. And what we've seen is, because of this increased spend into digital, there's been a lot deeper data, which in some ways makes it easier for a marketer to showcase their return on investment from their spend. That doesn't mean that print's wrong. It doesn't mean that events are wrong just because they're less measurable. It means they're a different activation with a different contribution towards the brand build. So I think it's going to be an education process to convince clients that digital is phenomenal, and we do get phenomenal metrics, but you need to look at the full media mix. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plans out.
Andrew, you brought up a number of good points, but I want to hone in on one, if I may. And you brought up the point that sales has had significant challenges because of and I'll call it the FaceTime, but I mean the handshake time that they have not been able to take advantage of during this period that we've been in. And I want to ask you, do you feel, in your opinion, that marketing, ergo media, your work, has become more strategic and more valuable in these last couple of years than perhaps it was thought of before? What's your take on that?
I would say generally so. I think, like, again, with the people on the call, we're all specialists in terms of industry knowledge as well. So when we go to speak to a client, we actually have really good access to sales and distribution, because we need to understand what their objectives are. They're often in the meetings, they often have a point of view, so we're quite embedded into our relationship with them. But what we have seen in certain clients is the marketing team have suddenly become the best friends of the sales teams.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they need to help them achieve their objectives. So I think that has risen in sales-led firms. That most certainly has led to an increase in the value of the marketing team.
That's a great point. And so I think what you're saying is that they've been forced to play together in a way that perhaps they had not in the past. And given what I do for a living, we've been doing this for 20 years, talking to groups of marketers and agencies. But yeah, a few years back, it was a real issue, this rift between sales and marketing. And I don't hear that language anymore. I hear about working together, and I hear, and so I'm wondering if you might agree with sort of where my head is going with this, that this could be a good thing moving forward, and that perhaps that rift has gotten a little bit mended, if you will, moving forward. Might you agree?
Yeah, I would do. And I also think it goes down to the data that marketing is able to provide back to sales, right? We've come a long way from impression viewability, clicks, click-through rates, right? We're now plugged right into the back end of clients' analytics systems. We're looking at the cost per action on site. We're looking at the fund prospectus downloads. We're pulling it back to QSIPs and advisor CRDs to plot fund flows. Now, if you in a sales role feel that your marketing team is making your life easier to convert that sale, and there's proof of that, there's proof of your marketing team sitting down with you and saying, hey, we've now got an IP matching solution to showcase that if we buy a wirehouse segment from Bloomberg, these are the wires coming to our site. This is what they're doing. This is what they're downloading. This is what they're consuming. This is what I'm delivering to you. That's a hugely powerful conversation. And we see a lot more of that now. Yeah. And the minute you can map down to engagement at IP or company level, right? Cookies are gone, or they're going. So that's a challenge, but the IP matching is coming through, and we have technology that we've built that really helps with that. But if you're a professional marketer within a sales-led organization and you're sitting down with your head of sales and distribution and showing them what you've delivered at company level through to fund flows, then you're that person's best friend for sure.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Andrew, thank you for that. And I'd like to move on to you with maybe a new line of thinking, or at least a new branch to talk about. I'd like to talk about social media and social marketing within the financial sector, and I'd really like to know what your take is on the value of social marketing in financial services. I won't say forever, but in the beginning of social media as marketing, financial marketers weren't quite sold on it because of compliance issues, because of the untethered nature of it, because of contextual issues, et cetera. What's the status of social media and marketing at this moment in time as it relates to financial services?
Well, I mean, I think social media, and I'm a paid media person, so it's
understood.
It's an interesting view. And our perspective is that social media is a two-way channel of communication, right? So it's not just pushing out, it's developing relationships and interacting. So if you are to move into, social channels, you need to have the systems in place that can support and respond to that two-way communication. So you have to be mindful and thoughtful and choiceful when you have only a finite amount of resources of where you want to go. So I think, from the long-term perspective, where can you go? And typically in financial services, for the clients that we work on that are more B2B driven, is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn can give you lots of the personalization that folks are looking for, the ability to be hyper targeted and deliver relevant messages that, are aligned to very specific customer segments. So there's certainly that, and there's lots of value there when you think about your content strategy and how you're deploying your content strategy. And the beauty of LinkedIn is that most often your connectivity is based on a post or something that you've shared, right? So you're not getting an angry customer to reach out to you on LinkedIn, which you might get on Facebook and Twitter. So really, still I do find there's lots of reservations in terms of, the broader suite of social, right? Because it certainly isn't just LinkedIn. And, you come down to lots of concerns over brand standards and trust. So, as we talk through our clients, we're really in the era of distrust, right? And that's not just this sector, it seems to be all sectors. So, when you're going to market and you're going forth with strategies, they need to be long-term in nature, and you need to be able to sustain that two-way connectivity. So for our groups, there's still a lot of reluctance to go beyond, that primary LinkedIn strategy. It's not to say that it doesn't work if you have a retail business, but if you have a B2B business and you're going to develop, big footprints on those different channels, you need to be able to have a team in place that can respond when somebody's reaching out. So if you do have a retail business and you want to be on Twitter, make sure that somebody's checking routinely your Twitter account. Otherwise, influencers abound and you might have tripped a wire that you can't pull back. So that's where we sit with social. It starts with organic, and it really needs to have a solid long-term strategy before you start pushing lots of paid media to build your followers.
You've explained that very well, the challenges and the benefits. And I sort of say this with a smile because I'm wondering, do your clients sometimes come to you and say, we really should be doing more social? And then after
Absolutely.
you really sit down and talk to them about the full issue, where they maybe say, I get it. I understand the risks maybe better than I did before.
So a lot of things come down to the inception of what your overarching, master brand approach is, right? And that's grounded in a budget. So you have a finite amount of dollars and you have a finite amount of services. And that's part of being a collaborative business partner, is understanding what your team's bandwidth can be, right? Because is the client who wants to be across, because everybody hears, great things are happening and there's award-winning campaigns happening everywhere. But a lot of times these are coming out of blue chip companies that have deep pockets and spend, in multipliers of 10, 20x of what our clients are spending. So I think that our clients recognize that and understand that certainly, there's a benefit and trade-off to every way you spend a dollar, and you need to think about, what you can support in the long term. And having an initiative like a 6-week, 8-week initiative on social media, if it's to promote a piece of content, sure, you can do that anywhere. But if it's to build those relationships and really maximize the value of a two-way communication channel, it has to live beyond that, flight of your campaign or your initiative.
Yeah. And thank you very much for that. Kim, if I may move on to you, I want to talk to you a little bit about content marketing. All right, and that's it's a huge topic, particularly in financial services. But I would like to ask your opinion on what are perhaps some of the well, if you could talk to me how you'd summarize some of the benefits of content and content marketing, and also some of the challenges that might not be top of mind for us as we consider content marketing as a topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think content marketing is obviously top of mind for everybody. We've shifted a lot of our dollars across the board. Every brand has into content marketing, and I think that there's a lot of value. It provides a deeper connection to brands. It gives a more clear point of view than just a simple banner ad or print ad or a TV ad. It really helps, I think, in a world where there is more and more skepticism. I think the end audiences understand the point of view and the perspective that brands are bringing forward. But I think that there is this perception from brands. And so all of that is good. And I think that content marketing is going to continue to evolve, and frankly, where more and more dollars are going to continue to be shifted with time. But I think that there is this perception from brands that we've got to be in content. Let's just push content. And I think very similar to what Anne was talking about from a social perspective, having a content strategy is crucial to pushing content. And I think a lot of brands put the cart before the horse in terms of how they think about content. And want to get out content, or think about it as promoting one piece of content versus thinking about their content pillars and what do they as a brand want to stand for. And so I think that there's a lot of struggles that brands have when they're not very clear about what their content pillars and content strategy are, and don't take a step back and say, let's not rush to market. Let's really focus on what are these core pillars? What do we need to focus on? Elevating our thought leaders. Do we need to focus on certain core capabilities? We can't focus on everything because, at that point, you're just boiling the ocean of too many topics, and then you're not a leader in any of them. And so it's taking a step back and having those honest conversations and building a content strategy, and then making sure that when you go to promote content, that it really does fit within one of the pillars. And if it doesn't, that there's an honest conversation around, why are we putting this in market in the first place? Because I think there is more and more noise than there has ever been from a content perspective. There's more and more content being promoted today than there's ever been before. And so brands are going to start to get lost if they don't think about, how do we really segment this out? I think the other big challenge of content, we've talked about this with a lot of our clients, and I think we've actually crafted some really phenomenal programs that have lived, I'm going to say, for the long term, over multiple spans of years. And some of them have gone on to win awards and been really super valuable for the business at large. But it is by being able to take a step back and say, what are we trying to accomplish? And do we really have the right writers or the right individuals within our organization to do that? Or do we need to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish with this content? What are we trying to bring to the brand and from a perception perspective? And then do we need to bring in an outside source to kind of help gain credibility in that conversation? And so, some of the best programs we've crafted have been with publishing partners in the space, where we've gone to them and said, here's our core need for this client, and here's what they do really, really well, and here's what we believe you do really, really well. And it's really crucial that we work together to find ways of elevating us both versus square peg round hole of just, slapping a logo or sponsoring something. And, those partnerships take time. They are not done by simply issuing an RFP or having a one-time conversation. They typically are iterative conversations that take, sitting, when we could sit at a table, sitting across the table now in a virtual world, being able to discuss and brainstorm what is really going to bring value to both sides. But again, you can't have those conversations until you've had the initial discussion of, what are you trying to accomplish with content? And what are our core pillars that we need to make sure we stay true to? Because without those, you're going to end up with very disparate strategies. It's interesting, right before right before, we all started working from home, we had, I remember vividly in February of 2020, we had an in-person meeting with a client where we sat there and said they had a bunch of internal content, podcasts that they were producing on their own and thought leadership that they were pushing through social. And, somebody had started a blog over here and somebody else had started a newsletter over here. And then we were also trying to do some of those same things in paid. And we had to take a step back and say, we're competing against ourselves, right? Everybody is looking to do the same thing, which is to elevate our brand and elevate our perception in these areas. But we are not supporting ourselves in this initiative. And I think, with our clients, but also for some of the top brands in the financial space, you see that all the time. You're producing an organic podcast, but you're sponsoring a podcast over here, and they kind of match, but they don't really match. And so how do you get brands to really take a step back and say, let's assess what we have and kind of make sure that it's rooted in those core things.
Yeah, Kim, thank you so much for that thorough explanation. A point that came up into my own head as you were speaking, and don't let me put words in your mouth, but I'm sort of looking for affirmation if I'm thinking about this correctly. But it's more that like content marketing is not like a thing. It's not just something you buy or do. Yeah. It's more of a process. Would that be a fair? I mean, there's really an end to the means of content marketing that has to be understood before you should just begin the practice. Does that make sense?
It does. And I kind of would draw the parallel to the sense that, you wouldn't put, for example, 5 different banner ads out there that have different looks and feels and different tones of voice, right? When brands go to market with their campaigns from, the digital ads or the print ads, all of the above, the best campaigns are the ones that have a cohesive look and feel. Now, that doesn't mean that everything needs to look the same, but it is said with the same visuals, it's said with the same voice. So when somebody sees it or reads it, they think, oh, yes, I know exactly who that is. And I think the same diligence needs to happen from a content marketing perspective.
Yeah. Kim, thank you for that. Now, listen, my friends, we have only but a few minutes left, and I have one final question that I'd like to ask each one of you. I'll ask you to be brief, just simply because this is one of those questions that could go on and on and on. But let me start with you, Andrew, if I may. What does the future look like in financial media as we think about it? And I'm going to say, let's put a window of maybe 3 or 5 years from now. How will media be different in your perspective?
I think to keep it brief, the biggest change that I will see affecting media in financial services is privacy and regulation. Yeah. It's already had a huge impact on us. It continues to have an impact. Anne mentioned GDPR in Europe, which is particularly punitive. We've got CCPA in California. We have New York State privacy laws potentially coming through. These all affect the usage and the way that we overlay data onto campaigns. We have cookies expiring in the near future. That's going to affect retargeting campaigns. So marketers need to think about that right now. A lot of them are already thinking about it, but now that the cessation of cookies has been delayed, it's gone on the back burner. But privacy and regulation is absolutely front of mind for me. All the other stuff, media channels, consumption, that's secondary to this for me.
Andrew, thank you so much for that thought. Anne, I'll ask you the same question, if I may.
I think one change in 3 years is I'm hopeful, that we're back together in person. I think humanity and connectivity really drives a lot that we have lost over the past 18 months. So I do see, the return to some form of normalcy. Digital will be more important, but there is the need for, that very traditional in-person interaction that hopefully, we will one day be able to return to. Another thing I would just say, given where we're at, outside of like the technology and privacy regulations, because I absolutely agree to that, but I think we're in the era of distrust, as I mentioned, and polarization. So I think specific to this sector, there's a demand and need for, thoughtful, credible, authoritative editorial. So those partners that are, or those publishers that are able to, you know, maintain a voice of authority and credibility, is those will be the ones that we're partnering with 3 years. I think we will see, you know, a lot of the bifurcation of how we buy continue, but it will be in those partners that can offer you, you know, brand safe environments with authoritative, thoughtful perspectives that, you know, financial professionals demand and need in an ongoing basis.
And thank you so much. And then Kim, I'll ask you the same question. The changes ahead, next 3-5 years.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the privacy. I think that's definitely top of mind. I would say I would go back to measurement and analytics. I think that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to continue to be pushed to show the value of what media and the dollars going behind media are continuing to bring from an ROI perspective to brands. And so, you know, it's interesting, the conversation about the connection between sales and marketing. I think that there's going to be a lot more pressure for that to continue and for those relationships to deepen. And so I think that our roles as in marketing and media specifically are going to continue to evolve. And we're going to need to come up with different ways of communicating out success stories without losing the strategy and the integrity of what we're doing. And I can't harp on this enough, and we have this conversation with all of our clients. You know, we can't be looking at metrics in this world on a weekly basis. You know, we need to be able to educate our clients and think about campaigns for the short, medium, but also the long term and their impact over those periods of time. But I do think that there is going to be changes that we're going to need to see, whether it becomes in the technology we adopt, but also in how we're communicating with our clients and communicating with our publishers alike.
Yeah. Kim, I thank you very much for that thought. Now listen, my friends, I'm afraid we have reached the end of our time together. I want to thank certainly our audience for joining us today. Secondly, I wish to thank Dianomi, Investing Channel, and Additions Financial for your support in allowing for this brilliant webinar to take place. And then lastly, of course, I want to thank our panelists, Kimberly Boone from Ptarmigan Media, Andrew Chesney from Fundamental Media, and Kane from T1 Media, and Andrew Wagner from Blacklight MA. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for educating me. We will see you soon. And thank you for doing this.